welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9, and will be available on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube channel at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and today I am honored and delighted to welcome Professor Barry Schrage here. He led Combined Jewish Philanthropies for an impressive 31 years, and he currently leads the Initiative for Jewish Identity at Brandeis University's Cohen Center for Modern Jewish Studies. Barry, welcome, and thank you so much for taking time to visit the morning show. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here. Really great to be here.
Great.
So pleased to be part of this community enterprise.
Well, thank you so much. We're also happy to welcome Rabbi Matthews of Newburyport's congregation Ahavas Achim. He is a returning and favorite morning show guest. So, Alex, welcome to you, and thank you once again for taking time to visit the morning show.
Thanks for having me, Mary. It sounds like you've been practicing pronouncing our name. It gets better each time.
One day I'll get that sound. It's down the road, though. Anyway, Barry and Alex are going to converse about some of the topics that we'll be talking about today in an upcoming event at Congregation Ahavas Achim. It's titled Reflections on American Jewry Today, and that will be held at 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, August 17th. We're very fortunate this morning to be able to preview some of the topics they'll be talking about. So first of all, Barry, I wanted to start with you. You did me the courtesy of sending me some of your writings to read, which I found to have the virtues of fearlessness, compassion, and clarity, which are three critical I think, virtues for writing to have. And some people may find it surprising, but you've written about this moment in Jewish history as potentially transformational. Now, since the horrors of October 7th and the still unresolved hostage crisis, not to mention the ongoing war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza, is a time of so much tragedy, violence, and divisiveness. So I'm eager to hear how it's a moment of transformation. But before we get into that, Barry, I wanted to talk about some distinctions I think people can get muddled about, and I'm hoping you can clarify distinctions between Jewish identity, Israel as a nation state, and the current government of Israel. And I ask this first because, as I said, I think there's a lot of muddling of these things in many people's minds. And to me, clarity is critical, especially when it comes to complexities. So could you start us out there by just drawing some distinctions?
I see you're starting with the easy stuff. So sure.
You said bring it on in one of your emails, yeah, Barry. I took you at your word.
I appreciate it because it's the only way to really understand what's going on here. So there's a myth that the people who are not friendly to Israel like to use, which is the American Jewish establishment will brook no opposition to Israel, no criticism of Israel. And people come back from trips to Israel or whatever, and they say, they didn't tell us the truth. They didn't tell us, my answer to that is simple. When I was at CJP, an establishment organization, we were critical all the time. I was critical in discussions with donors. I mean, who really believes that everything is perfect in Israel? The people of Israel don't believe that everything is perfect in Israel. I wrote a blog as part of CJP, highly critical of the Netanyahu administration when they were trying to throw out asylum seekers. It was an ugly scene. It was happening right over Passover when it shouldn't have been all that. Very critical of the Hilltop Youth and their attacks on innocent Palestinians. All of that, when that was required, we were there. The line is that support for the existence of Israel is paramount. In other words, and I don't think you can separate that so easily from Jewish identity, because if you don't care about the fate of 7 million Jews whose lives are literally in danger, then I don't know what Jewish identity means. It's sort of like, on October 7th, anybody who wasn't crying their eyes out, there's something wrong.
Absolutely.
It was, you watch the pictures, you saw what they were doing. If you didn't have sympathy, and if you weren't at a moment of their maximum weakness, your identification with your people is important. No one would deny anyone the right to be sympathetic to the lives of their own people.
Right.
which does not eliminate our requirement to be concerned about the existence of others and the safety of others and everything else. But fundamentally, at a moment of danger, you're drawn to your people. And I think that a Jewish identity itself is yes. Look, we're all for Jew. I've been totally dedicated to Jewish education all my life. Rabbi, I'll tell you, it's been a fundamental part of my work at CJP. But before the average Jewish person will care about studying Torah, they need to identify with the Jewish people. If they're not identifying with the Jewish people, if you're a college student and God forbid you're actually interested in something spiritual, highly unlikely anyway, and you want to take a course, why would you choose choose to study Judaism as opposed to Christianity or the Buddha or the Bhagavad Gita or any of that stuff? And the answer is all those things are beautiful and fine and they ought to be studied, but you choose Torah because you want to know more about your own people, because you feel an identification with your people. Does that straighten anything out? Did I actually answer your question?
Beautifully straightening out. One of the joys of living in democracy is supposed to be having debates and agreements, sometimes intense disagreements, about what the current government in power is doing. Because when we don't have the freedom to do that, we're in effect not living in a democracy anymore. And Israel is a democracy, so that was beautifully put. Alex, anything you wanted to add to that?
I'm glad to have gotten to listen to it, and I think I could go in 10 different directions of my own. I mean, just to clarify what you just said about democracy, for kind of an American audience to understand, right, is the Israeli system of governance is so much different than our own, with it being a parliamentary system. Like, there's parts that we just don't understand about what it means to have a governing coalition, and complications that do take studying and understanding and recognizing that it's not a perfect analog to the way that we think about representation and governance. And then the other piece I want to say is just like that there is, I think one of the things that has really struck me over the course of the last couple of years, relating back to what Barry said about kind of the need for compassion, the need to be able to criticize, the need to be able to have open conversation, especially as it relates to October 7th, is one of the things that I feel like I've come up against, is that there were critical, non-compassionate, celebratory voices on October 7th and October 8th, right? And that's generally made it that instantly led people, I think within the Jewish community, but also outside the Jewish community, who are generally supporters of Israel, to kind of retreat so deeply into defensiveness and into separate corners that almost 2 years later, when I think there are a lot of people who would like to have more intentional, critical discussions and who kind of do have their own thinking opened up in some ways, that initial kind of fissure and extreme stance really makes it harder to ever have a constructive dialogue down the line.
Yeah, and it's so important that we're able to have constructive dialogues. And what you were saying, Alex, takes me to the next question I wanted to pose to Barry, because you've written, as I said, about this being this moment as having a transformational potential. And so I was hoping you could talk a little bit about why now? What is the transformational potential that you see in this conflicted, turbulent moment?
Sure. Let me just say that I do draw the line between critical discussion. Like I said, this is not, it's all over the place. Anybody in any congregation who wants to say, I wish that Netanyahu wasn't the prime minister of Israel, they would have like 40 people all for them.
Yeah. If
they say, on the other hand, that I think that the only way to get through this thing is supporting Hamas and the goals of the Islamist revolution, or because for all kinds of other reasons, that's outside the boundary, in my mind. I mean, you can play it any way you want. No one's going to get thrown out of a synagogue, but I don't think. But I think that there are boundaries, and the boundary has to do with. It's the same thing as with the United States. We can be. It's not like our government is perfect here, right? I'm going to argue with that. But the question is whether you stay loyal to the idea of the United States of America or you want to reject the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the issue. The transformational part is that there was a great academic article. It was written by Jonathan Sarna, who's also a professor at Brandeis. It's called, I think it's called The Great Awakening of American Jewry, or the Fourth Great Awakening. And it's a historical understanding of great awakenings in America, Protestant awakenings, and how that came forward, a possibility in the American Jewish community. And of course, the Great Awakening for the American Jewish community was the '67 war, which kind of led us from an ethos of assimilation, which anybody who remembers the 50s, the 40s, the 50s, the gentleman's agreement, kind of an ethos of assimilation, and moved us to an ethos of pride. That was the Great Awakening. It changed us. You could hear people say, until that moment, I never held my head up high as a Jew in America. It was a fundamental change, the '67 war. In a very different way, this represents the possibility of annihilation, which we felt at that moment on October 7th, and then followed up on October 8th. And you could see it. So on the one hand, you do have part of the next generation that's ready to check out on Israel altogether. And on the other hand, you have another 10, 20, 25% who are crowding in for warmth and to escape from the anti-Semitism, to protect ourselves and our people in Israel. So you will have people who will say, until this happened, I never really clarified what it means to be a Jew here or in the world. The threat of anti-Semitism on the one hand, the other stuff that's happening, the critical news coverage, all the rest. I can go through that in detail. But this is potentially a great awakening, a moment, a shift in history, something that can have permanent consequences for Jewish identity and the future of our relationship with Israel and with ourselves and with our synagogues.
Well, that's fascinating, Barry, and so important to be able to identify the potential awakening and a positive motion forward, to focus attention on defining a unifying Jewish identity. And I know that's a large part of your focus and your work. So tell us about that and your vision for formulating such an awakening of a unifying Jewish identity. What is your vision for that? What would be new? What would be a revival of old, deep, or eternal values or narratives that bring people together?
Well, I think it's essential for there to be an understanding between American Jews and Israelis, as people and as cultures, to really, we've been working on this at CJP since way before any of this happened. And what we did was we created a partnership with the city, with Haifa and the Jewish community in Haifa, actually with all of Haifa, including Arabs and Jews and Druze and everybody else. And the idea was to really get to know each other. In other words, the way things were going, where we were just sending over money and we send over missions that wouldn't even say hello, that would just pass through and have, every stereotype in the world. Once we get to know each other, then we can ask questions. I want somebody to be, that's why I like Birthright and I like what that can do. You're sitting there with an Israeli soldier, by the way, who aren't right-wing fanatics at all. When they ran into the battle zone, not even having orders, just to save their country, so you need to know why they did that. And they're going to ask you, why do American Jews have their political views? Shouldn't everybody be supporting Trump because he loves Israel? And you say, no, we've got other concerns here. And this guy's got a lot of problems. And we don't think that's a solution for whatever you want to say. The point is for them to understand us in depth and for us to understand what it means to be an Israeli soldier who's running into battle, and at the risk of his life. Most American Jews haven't encountered a human being who's ever risked his life for anything. It's a transformational moment. So number one, increase mifgash, which means encounter.
And Barry, you used the phrase birthright, and some people listening to this may not know. We can infer what it meant. Could you just quickly define what that is?
Sure. It's a program that provides a free trip to Israel for anybody between ages of 18 and 23. They've already been 900,000 kids who've gone through it.
Oh, wow.
And that in and of itself made a difference on October 7th, October 8th, which means at least people had a basic understanding. They've seen Israelis, they know Israelis, whatever. And then we can go on from there. We can be as critical as we want. But first, let's listen to the heart of an average Israeli who's certainly no kind of fanatic, probably hates Netanyahu as much as you do. It sounds
eye-opening.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to be brothers and sisters, if we're going to really care about each other, we got to get to know each other. So one of the changes I think we need to make is to intensify our encounter, with Israelis. I think that's going to be kind of a critical part. And then we move from there to increased investment in Jewish education, Jewish camping, anything that will at least allow us to encounter in depth what has been, not necessarily a meaning. And by the way, you're talking about, like, I don't remember, the rabbi probably knows, but something like 40%, maybe more, of non-Orthodox young people are now children of intermarriage. 60%. It's a majority.
What, Alex?
It's a high number.
It's a very high number. And on the other hand, the other part of this is people are interested in meaning and purpose in their lives, and they'll explore every part of what that identity can mean. And that includes especially children of intermarriage. So there's plenty of work for us to do in order to turn this moment of chaos, personal chaos, into a moment of reflection and finding meaning and purpose in our lives, which is what, like, being Jewish is all about, in a way, I guess.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Barry. Thank you for that. I think meaning and purpose are critical to happiness and wisdom. So, Alex, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add to that a little bit from kind of the greater Newburyport area perspective, right? Like, Barry and his incredible work with CJP, they are essentially, and you can correct me as much as you want or add as much as you want, Barry, but what they do is they are a supportive institution for all of the Jewish communities of greater Boston. I think we might be like the farthest north that they touch, right? And that's a vast, diverse population array. And hearing Barry talk about the Hebrew word that he used, mifgash, which means encounter, like, such a core part of my work and our work as a community is, most of the kids in our Hebrew school are the only Jews, if not in their class, then in their grade, then in their school, right? We pull from 4 or 5 different districts because we're the only synagogue in a 20-mile radius, with the synagogue in Haverhill closing down earlier this year, right? And so, it's building those exposures. And Barry mentioned Jewish camp. Like, Jewish camp is where my Jewish identity developed, even though I was surrounded by Jewish culture for the entirety of my childhood. But it gives kids like the ones growing up in Newburyport or Amesbury or southern New Hampshire an opportunity to be surrounded by other Jews, which is something by other Jewish kids, which is something they're not going to get, right? And that's a facet of life in this type of Jewish community that is part of the reality, but figuring out how we build and strengthen that identity and make it a source of joy and community support and spiritual value, and not just a reaction to anti-Semitism or a reaction to hatred. Like, that's, again, both a really big challenge and a really big opportunity, because it's those building out those positive facets that are a big driver in my work and why I want to be doing it.
Not only pride, as you were talking about, Barry, but also a kind of a grounding wire that keeps you centered around something that has a depth of meaning, that can become kind of a core value and a way to get to know yourself and define who you are in a positive, meaningful way. You were talking about numbers, and one of the things that you wrote about, Barry, was you talk about Jews as a small, vulnerable people. And I think a lot of people have no idea how small the Jewish population worldwide is. 15 million in a world population of nearly 8 billion. And I think that's about 1%. Of course, acknowledging, as you did in your writing, 6 million murdered Jews from only 80 years ago in a genocidal Nazi war. So I hope that you could talk about how this reality, I mean, Alex has started talking about it, and just growing up and, sometimes being the only Jewish kid in your neighborhood and going to camp is great to help deal with that. Could you talk about how this reality impacts the need for the kind of unifying identity that you've been focusing on?
Well, I would say I don't think we can make it divided. I don't think so. Not in Israel, not here, not in our relationship with each other. We've got to understand each other, and we've got to have some common understanding and belief. Look, there's a whole part of the problem in the current situation has to do with actually the cultural challenges within the United States and within the West. We were dealing with, before this started, we were dealing with divisions that were around. In other words, so if you say that that in order to be progressive, you have to be weak. In other words, if having power, means that you're excluded, and this is what was happening on campuses. In other words, Israel was rejected even being weak didn't really help us. Even having our people slaughtered on camera didn't help us. The next day, the people who were part of an entire academic way of thinking, right? The operating system of the university was widely based on a cultural idea that the United States has been evil from the start. That the whole world, the way of thinking about it, is the weak against the strong. Anybody who is identified with the strong is rejected, and that was so powerful. So it's like, if we're going to survive in this, we've got to have some subtle ways of thinking about this stuff and a way of beginning to think about our own culture in a different way. That's the only thing about the Holocaust is that that's not a way of identifying, but it certainly is a way of understanding that if the world is about the weak against the powerful, and you decide that the best thing to be is to be weak, you know what? We read the book, we saw the movie, we saw the play. We never liked the ending. It's a very bad ending. It always ends with dead Jews, and it's and therefore, look. Like I said, this does not mean it. I felt like during the whole judicial reform thing in Israel, where the right was doing, I thought, terrible things, unnecessary things to divide the Jewish people. I said the thing for American Jews to do is to put resources into organizations within Israel that were fighting the trend, like Israel Democracy Institute, or like various organizations that are trying to strengthen the democratic rights of Israeli Arabs. All that stuff is a way of saying that we love Israel and we're prepared to invest in a different vision. They're investing their very lives, the lives of their children, in preserving, and at least preserving their lives in the face of an implacable enemy. And that doesn't mean that we have to support them in everything that we do, but it means that we better figure out what we need to do in order to strengthen democracy in Israel, in order to strengthen the forces that we favor, just as the Israelis have to do the same thing. And we've got our hands full in this country too. So,
absolutely. That's inspiring, Barry, because it's important to be strong in your values. And if you're not willing to fight for them, the results will take care of themselves. I mean, we have to be clear what we stand for is what I think you're saying, and find allies, wherever group they come from, who also share those values, and then be strong and carry them forward, and hope and insist that you will win. So, Alex, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
A little bit. I mean, going back to kind of your original prompt and just the actual kind of focus on numbers, right, is kind of a reminder of the need to ground things in reality in the 21st century, when reality is like somehow able to slip between our fingers in terms of AI and algorithms and all these things that just cause us such headaches. Like, I don't know how many people who would listen or watch this interview know what the actual population of Jews in the world is. Right? Know that it's only 15 million. The kind of the famous stat that got pulled out when Kanye West started going on his anti-Semitic rants on Twitter was that he had more Twitter followers than there's Jews in the world, right? And like, that's mind-blowing. And I can't, and I certainly don't have time. Maybe Barry could, if we really want to dig into it. Like, I can't speak to all the reasons in which Jews are perhaps, have a standing in the world that is in the world and in the perception of the world that is outsized in comparison to that actual population center. but kind of having a foot firmly grounded in the reality and against the wild thinking, the conspiracy theory thinking, the anti-Semitic kind of conspiracy-based things. Like, we should be proud of the very strong lineage of Jews in Hollywood and the way that, the way that American actors and comedians like draw on their Jewish identity to give those gifts to the world. It shouldn't be the foundation of some kind of conspiracy theory about Jewish power, right? Like, we need to be able to, we need to be able to separate these things out, and I really want to be able to feel pride for the outsized impact of this small, population that has managed to remain cohesive over 3,000 years plus of history. But we really need to figure out how to tell the truth about that and not have that be a source for kind of, all of the ways in which people have turned it around on us with skepticism and hatred.
That's a really interesting point, I think, Alex, because it's kind of astonishing, given the small population of Jews in the world, the vast footprint of cultural contributions, of historic legacy, of as they call it, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the positive impact that Jews historically have had on our culture and our history. And I totally agree with you. It's time to, promote that kind of information and then get rid of the ridiculous conspiracy theories, which would make you think that, the numbers were very different. Well, I did want to talk a little bit, at least, because the word Zionism gets thrown about so much today, and I think often in ways where people don't really understand the historical significance of it and what its importance, not just for the Jewish people in Israel, but for Jews in America and for all people around the world. So if you don't mind spending just a little bit of time just defining Zionism in its historical context and why it's so important.
Rabbi, you want to do that?
Oh, I was very excited to pass this one over to you.
So I think, look, Zionism, is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. I mean, that's what it is. It's a dream of rebirth that's as old as the Jewish people is, starting with our march from Egypt to what became Israel. It's part of our, for the people who were praying, who cared about being Jewish. I mean, you're praying in the direction of Jerusalem, and you're always thinking that there's going to be a rebirth of our national heritage, of our national independence, and all the rest of that. But it became more than a dream. It became sort of an imperative. I don't want to make too much of we had people settling in Israel before the Holocaust. It wasn't just the Holocaust, but there was a certain part of Herzl's dream that was born, during the Dreyfus trial. It was like, we have no future here in Europe. There's no future. We got to go somewhere. We better get out of here because it's going in a bad direction. His perception of what was going to happen, which seemed ridiculous, at the time, all of a sudden became. I had the horrible experience of rewatching Cabaret, and you sort of watch the slow deterioration of our position in Germany and how rapidly. It actually took, thousands of years of anti-Semitism to get us to that place. It seems that in the last 2 years, the perception of Jews has become untenable in lots of places. It's and it went fast, really fast. So I would say the need to have a place where we can defend ourselves, where we can establish our national home, reestablish our national culture, all of that. Now, Zionism, for the people who try to redefine Zionism as some kind of militaristic, militant, it's not that. It was just an idea that we could find a home in a place that had other people living there for sure, but had no political definition under the Turkish Empire, what's the missing the word, Ottoman Empire, and and to find our place there was a dream, and we were able to, with sweat, blood, and tears, we were able to establish ourselves there, and to have a. Now the question isn't, do we have a right to exist or should we exist? We exist.
Yeah.
We exist, and there are millions of people there 7 million Jews who won't exist if that thing disappears. So that's not a question anymore. Nobody asks about whether Switzerland should exist or any other country should exist. So Zionism just means that we have a right to be there, and we will be there, and we're staying there and willing to fight for it. Yeah. It's not like for an average American Jew who says that they love Israel and that they're a Zionist, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have any political vision whatsoever. It just means that they care about Israel and they're willing to support it for the average person's definition of it. You get more sophisticated and take a course in Zionism. And of course, I'm teaching at a university that happens to be named after the founding of American Zionism. There's a lot to learn about all of that, but the idea that for the vast majority of American Jews that we care about its existence is what defines us as Zionists.
Thank you, Barry. That adds clarity to, I think, something that can often get really muddled for people.
I simplified it.
Yeah, but I think that's helpful. I think
distorting it is the way I clarified it.
No, I think it's helpful, and one of the things that helps is you clarify that Jews' history goes way, way, way back as well, and so it's home, and it was home for a long time, and everybody has to live somewhere, and I think the way you put it just clarifies the basic meaning of it, and I think that's important for people to understand. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was a book that you cite that I hadn't heard of, and I think it's just very interesting. And it came out, interestingly, just a month before October 7th, and it's by Dan Senor, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Saul Singer, and it's called The Genius of Israel, The Surprising Resilience of a Divided Nation in a Turbulent World. And the book was written to investigate a counterintuitive reality that a nation surrounded by enemies and under intermittent rocket attack has nonetheless been ranked as one of the happiest nations in the world. The World Happiness Survey comes out every year, and I used to study and teach positive psychology, so I'm aware of it, and I always check it out every year. I mean, Finland is always number one. Okay, every year, Finland is number one. It's usually followed by other Scandinavian countries. They have such a well-developed social welfare state that everybody contributes to, but everybody benefits from it. Guess what? It makes people happy. But Israel was fifth in 2023, and even last year, post-October 7th, in 2024, Israel was number 8. The U.S., guess what, was number 24. So talk to us about those findings and how you understand what it is about life in Israel that makes people happy.
We're all crazy. We're nuts.
But happy crazy.
I think it gets back to the question. So there are a lot of things that they cite. One is a sense of family. Most Israelis are not religious, but they religiously go to visit their parents and have Shabbos dinner with them. And they might not call it Shabbat dinner, but they will be with their family. It's not a big country. It's not so hard to do. And the feeling of closeness to your family and having family is a component of happiness. The other part of it is it's the very challenge of being there that lends us some sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. It's like, why did every one of those kids kind of like just get up and go and join their units before they were even called? Yeah. That's the other part. It's a sense of connection to other people. The Army is part of that. I don't know whether every one of them is risking their lives for the land and for the Jewish people, and that's part of it. But another part of it is the cohesiveness of the Army units. You're fighting for the other guys who are there. Now, in a country like America, where such a small part of the population ever gets into the Army, that notion doesn't necessarily mean much about our feeling about America. But if everyone you know is in the Army and everyone you know is part of a unit, then if that unit is in trouble, look, there was a nice there's a nice Devar Torah that I heard on a podcast, and it was a comment on the report of the spies in the Torah, who came back from the land of Israel and said, things aren't so great. There are giants. We should be afraid. Let's not go in. And the analogy that the guy made who was doing this thing was like, in a way, what just happened is our repentance for that act of not going in. So Jews all over the world studying in America, studying at Harvard, at Princeton, at other universities, not just in America, but all over, the planes were full of people coming back. What the hell does that mean? Right? There are missiles coming in all over the place. Even in the first days when it looked like Israel could actually crumble and everyone's life was in danger, and they were all flooding back. And that's meaning and purpose.
Yeah,
that means that you have something to. So it's a combination of a family feeling. It's a sense of connection. Obviously, as you know very well, this doesn't mean that they all agree. 70% of Israelis would just as soon have Netanyahu gone right now. But they ain't going to abandon their units. They're not going to not be there. That's why, in a way, this is also a defining moment in Jewish history. How do we make sense of all of this?
Mary, can I add a couple
of course,
things?
Alex. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
No. First of all, just to clarify, Bar Torah is like a sermon or a homily, something like that. For those who aren't familiar with the Hebrew term, just a couple things to add.
It could be the sermon that you're a minister or you're a priest.
One of the things, again, kind of in comparing American and Israeli society and the ways in which we think about national identity or patriotism, right? Israeli society is deeply divided and has been for several years, starting kind of most in the public eye with the judicial overhaul bill that was going through Parliament right before October 7th that Barry referenced earlier. There's a tremendous amount of disagreement over drafting, over religious exemptions from the military draft, other changes that are being proposed within the government, West Bank policy, Gaza policy, like all of these things. One of the hallmarks of the very large and very present protest movements that have been going on within Israeli society by Jewish Israelis for the last several years is you still see them clad in the Israeli flag, right? The number one protest symbol in Israel is the Israeli flag. Think about that in comparison to America, where a large part of kind of the left or the liberal world has almost has seeded the American flag as a symbol of the right or conservative leaning world, right? Like that is a really powerful statement of values and of whether kind of vision and repair might ever be possible, right? And I think that actually does, I think there is a sense of, it's a tiny country. I forget what state it would fit inside, right? Versus
New Jersey.
Okay, thank you. Versus this behemoth of the United States, right? But even amidst kind of deep division, I think there's just a different attitude of kind of the need for some sort of social cohesion and hope for the future that I think when we think about it relative to kind of relative to the current state of affairs in America, we feel a lot more inclined to just kind of throw up our hands. The other thing that's worth noting, and this was highlighted for me, I was actually in Israel on a trip with a environmental-based nonprofit called Ahavas last year. Obviously, the country is still in turmoil and has been turned completely topsy-turvy over the last 2 years. They still are very much in October 7th and October 8th. Setting that aside, however we can for a moment, like there are parts of Israeli society that fulfill kind of some of the wildest dreams of what we think of as like liberal or egalitarian ideals, right? Like the acceptance and presence of the LGBTQ plus community in Israel, certainly within the Middle East is light years ahead of anywhere else in the region. But on the global scale, Tel Aviv is like a world-class city that has scenes for whatever you are looking for, right? healthcare policy, support of parents, different environmental awareness, different innovation and business and technology, all of those things are off the charts in Israel.
Yeah.
A lot of that gets overlooked and muddled in the fact that they still have not addressed what it means, what is their relationship to Gaza and the West Bank and Palestinian and other minority populations. But for a huge part of the population, quality of life there and progress that they are making in so many different spheres is light years ahead of what you would expect, and does speak to a country that should be in the top 10 of the happiness index.
Alex, thank you for that. I think you're absolutely right. People, myself included, didn't know all those things because it's not the image of Israel that gets fed to us largely by what the news media, especially today, consider worth covering. So thank you for that. That's really fascinating. I'll have to catch up on it. And, Finland, watch out. We get the kind of renewed unifying Jewish identity that Barry is talking about and find a way to resolve the current conflicts. And, those are all amazing aspects of Jewish culture and society that we could learn a lot from. So thank you for that. It's so much fun to talk to you. I could go on forever, but we only have so much time. So I want to end on a positive note with both of you. I want to ask each of you, what gives you hope right now?
I think that for me, I believe the people of Israel give me hope. They've been through all this somehow or other. They've managed to maintain their cohesion to some degree. Look, there's a lot of cohesion around in a way. You could say, and most people would, that it was stupid to restrict the flow of food into Gaza. And a lot of Israelis would agree with that. And a lot of Israelis would agree that we ought to end the war right now in order to. But at the end of the day, the pursuit of the war from the beginning was actually unifying. I mean, no one. And the question. Look, there's not going to be a two-state solution the day after tomorrow. There was not a lot of belief in that idea, after the Second Intifada. I can go through all the stuff that disappointed liberal Israelis and that destroyed the left in Israel. We can go through all that, but that's not the point. There is cohesion, and while there may not be the chance for a two-state solution tomorrow, there is going to be a fight over the ability to at least be open to a future that contains a two-state solution. There's a vast amount of hope if we can get through this, through the Gaza situation now. There's great hope in the Arab world for an accommodation with the Arab world, with Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords. We can get there, but there needs to be. I just heard an interesting podcast, but it was basically saying the majority of Israelis are not part of the fanatical right or the fanatical left. They're in the middle. Somebody's got to unify them. Of course, I don't want to get into great detail about this, but the weird part about all this is that the only person who can bring together the right and the left is Netanyahu, and whether he's going to be willing to take a chance in order to create a new future for Israel, and he's always been the one who's had the power to do that, unless somebody else can kind of emerge that would be a leader that could bring people together, like Sharon once was able to do, also coming from the right. There are chances, there are huge opportunities for peace. The fact that Iran may no longer be a threat is a huge opportunity. The victories that we had in this, I can't tell you how confusing all this is. I can't tell you. You wake up one morning and your biggest dream is that maybe Netanyahu will resign. And then the next day, it turns out that somebody knew everything there was to know about Hezbollah, and 200,000 missiles that were threatening Israel's very existence in a very real way were taken out overnight. Who knew that? Who knew that we knew all that about Iran? Who knew? So you're being whiplashed between hope and despair throughout this whole era. But we came through all of this, and again, it's going to require courageous political leadership. But there is an opportunity, and there's no point. And if you're a Jew, there's no point in being hopeless. There's no point in it. You know, the fact that you've got some kind of horizon, that the people here have a horizon, and that we're in dialogue with our brothers and sisters in Israel, means that there's some kind of hope.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a hope for peace. I think that let me just say one more thing. The day after October 7th, we were pitiful. In other words, everybody in the region thought we were going to be easy prey, and they were gathering together to do something about that. And the idea that, like, you know, a year later, we seem to have defeated all of those enemies that were surrounding us, the ring of fire that Soleimani had conjured up to destroy Israel, that was gone. So we somehow came through all of this. Now we have to use the victories that we've had in order to establish the possibility of peace. It's there.
Thank you for that, Barry. Somebody once said to me, hope isn't an emotion, it's a stance that you decide to take in life. So, and it's clearly there. So, Alex, what about you?
I will admit that I am. This is not the easiest question for me to answer in the moment. Like I think also just in the moment where you're catching me, I'm feeling a little bit more burdened by some of the topics that we've been talking about. That being said, my kind of stock answer for when people have asked me over the last, weeks, months, years, how I'm doing or how things are going, my general answer is things in the micro, like greater Newburyport sense or the CAA sense, or like my day-to-day life are generally great. The world is, presenting some major challenges, and I cannot say the same for the big picture kind of stuff. And I think holding on to the things on a day-to-day basis or on a community level that are going really well is an important part for me to, kind of keep my head up and hold on to the hope for the bigger picture or the long term, right? Yeah. So the synagogue is doing wonderful things. Our membership is growing. Our programming is strong. We're going to have a great, full room for Barry on Sunday. We're gearing up for the high holidays. I get the opportunity to do things like coming here to talk to two really well-informed, friendly and engaging people. Like, that's really great stuff. I got to, visit a Jewish day camp on Friday afternoon and hang out with a bunch of kids ages probably like 5 to 15 and talk to them for a couple minutes about heading into Shabbat and preparing for kind of what should be nourishing us spiritually and even physically through that spirit of rest and refresh as Jewish people, right? And so, yeah, holding on. I don't have answers to the world's problems. I'm really glad that people like Barry are around to think big picture about what's facing the Jewish people and how we can represent ourselves and maintain and repair relationships with the state of Israel and with the greater world that are being fractured over what's going on in Israel and Gaza. At the same time, like being able to focus in on the people around me and what we want to contribute to the world as individual Jews and as a Jewish community, that's where I consistently find a lot of joy and hope and hope to kind of be able to plug into finding some balance there, right? Of doing what I can and what we can, and also being able to tap into some of those big picture thinkers and not give up on the fact that it hopefully it won't be this way forever for us, for Israelis, for Palestinians, right? That there can be a different future.
Yeah. Well, thank both of you for that. What gives me hope is acquiring knowledge that has a ring of truth. And so you've both given me hope because you both provided knowledge that has the ring of truth. And that is hopeful to me. So thank you both so much. It's been just a fascinating and a real joy to learn from you and to talk with you. And I thank you for that very much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Don't forget, we'll get into even tougher stuff. on Sunday. So
Yes,
be there or be square.
I'm going to, just to repeat that will be Reflections on American Jewry Today, 5:30 p.m. Sunday, August 17th, at 53.5 Washington Street. It's free and open to the public and includes a light supper for people that might make the deciding decision for them. And on the YouTube version of this episode of The Morning Show, you will find a clickable link which you can use. Registration is required, and that clickable link will give you a website you can click on or a phone number to call to register and leave your name. Thank you, Barry, so much. Thank you, Alex, so much. It's been a joy to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
So nice to meet you, really. So nice.
Very nice. Thank you, Barry. That's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for The Morning Show. And until then, everybody, be well and find your hope. Bye-bye.